Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking with Wafa Bahri. Wafa is she was born in Tunisia. She's living in the US right now. She's an ex-Muslim. She's also has worked as an educator, and she's just gotten her PhD in linguistics, more from like a social standpoint, and she's looking into the indigenous languages in Tunisia. Hi Wafa, thank you for coming on.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I was hoping that if you could give a bit of your background, and then from there we can just start going.
Okay, so my name is Wafa. That's my most common name. People know me most by Wafa, even though my name on the papers is Soubeika. I'm born and raised in Tunisia. I'm currently an ex-Muslim, being ex-Muslim for about 4 years, I think. And I just graduated with a PhD degree in linguistics. With a major focus on sociolinguistics. I mean, most of my work has been done within the framework of sociolinguistics, even though my PhD can also fit in linguistics anthropology. My research has been always focused on revitalizing Tunisian Amazigh, which has been classified endangered in the ethnologue. But with my PhD, my major work was on the ideology. Basically, I've looked at the ideological display of the revitalization project through social media, and specifically on Facebook. I had to do Facebook what's recently called online ethnography, because I was not able to sponsor field work in the traditional sense of the word and go back to Tunisia and collect data. But the Facebook, has been doing a great job. It's a major catalyst of all the revitalization efforts that's been going on with regard to Tunisian Amazigh. So that's pretty much a general introduction about me. I'm also an educator. I've been teaching French and Arabic and linguistics as well. Yeah, that's pretty much what's about me.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, I want to add something you just said there, because I just know from what I've read. I've never been or like really studied it. So like for me, when I hear Amazigh, I'm thinking Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, and like technically, I guess they're Berbers, and but so when you say like the Tunisian, is there like different dialects or slightly different customs from place to place, or is it something completely different?
Obviously, yes. So Tamazight, the most common or the most known word, basically in the Western Berberist research, is Berber. But recently, research have been trying to adopt an emic approach, which means call the language and the people by what the speakers themselves want to be called, and that's Amazigh people. Amazigh is the singular of the singular form, the singular adjective. The plural is Imazighan people, and the name of the language is Tamazight. It's an Afro-Asiatic language, and with regard to how many, is it one language or many languages, where that's still a controversy. I mean, you cannot really put a clear boundary between what are the Tamazight languages and what are the and Tamazight dialects. It's still a subject in debate. But with linguistically speaking, and by referring to the ethnologue, there have been at least 27 Tamazight languages that differ from each other, in a way or another, phonologically, morphologically, lexically, and plus numerous of regional dialects in Tamazight. With regard to Tunisia, I, as a linguist, I would like to view it as a separate language, because it's not so very much, as much as it's similar to other varieties of Tamazight spoken in Morocco, Algeria, Libya, also in Burkina Faso and Chad and Niger. It is also so different, just like taking the example of Morocco, for instance, there are at least 3 main languages that they are not mutually unintelligible, or even if they are mutually intelligible, it's to an extent. There are at least 3 languages, and those are Tashalhit, Tarifit, and Tamazight, which is the name of the phylum, and at the same time a name of a different spoken variety. In Algeria, there is Kabyle, which is totally different from the variety spoken in Morocco. In Libya as well, the Nafusa Tamazight, spoken near the mountains of Nafusa, for instance, plus many other varieties in Libya. So in my work, I treated Tunisian Tamazight as similar to an extent, just the rest of the varieties, but also a different language. And like I said earlier, it's a language in a process of revitalization because of the socio-political factors and the Arabo-Islamic ideologies that have worked so hard on erasing the language and identity within the regard of Tunisia. Unlike the Tamazight variety spoken in Morocco and Algeria, like Tashalhit, Tarifit in Morocco, and Kabyle in Algeria, who could resist over time. Despite the fact that they're under so much attack, which continued to date. There are plenty of varieties. I'd like to use the sociolinguistics to be on the safe side, the sociolinguistics term, variety, rather than language or dialect, because, even linguistically, the difference between language and dialect is still controversial and blurry. The Yiddish linguist, Weinrich, if I pronounce his name correctly, he identifies language as or a dialect as a language with no army. It's all related to the power. It's a question of power, and that's what distinguishes what makes the main distinction between a language and dialect. By power, social and political power.
Okay, I just want to touch on that. Maybe you'd mentioned that it's an endangered language and it's dying out. So what percentage of Tunisians would fall into like Amazigh as opposed to Arab? And then if this language is dying out, what percentage of the population of all of Tunisia would speak this language?
Okay, that's a very nice question, because the census are still lacking with regard to how many speakers of Tunisian Tamazight are available in Tunisia. You find estimable numbers such as 1% of the population, but I cannot say that that's an accurate percentage out of 11 million, of course. Particularly after the revolution, when the situation has been changing tremendously with regard to Tunisian Tamazight. So linguistically, it could be still a minority. We can still call it a minority, but again, there are no census. We're still lacking on exact census of how many speakers of native speakers, or those who speak Tamazight as a mother tongue, are available in Tunisia, and unfortunately, that causes a lot of hinder with regard to those who are interested in doing research in Tunisian Tamazight, and those are, they're coming up nowadays. There is much a rise of interest in looking at this variety of Tamazight. Unfortunately, the government continues not to be helpful. We continue not to know how many speakers there are. But we know, unlike before the revolution, where at the best there were only 2 theses written about Tunisian Tamazight. And those are the only pieces of literature that were available before. I mean, during all the post-independence till the 2011 revolution, and in both of these theses, both authors claimed that there were no monolingual speakers of Tamazight in Tunisia anymore. However, in my research, I came to know recently that, well, you can still find monolingual speakers who really don't know how to speak Arabic, nor the Tunisi, which is the colloquial variety. Deem it to be called a colloquial variety of Arabic, but linguistically speaking, that's not true, and we may talk about this later. So later on. So I again, not clear senses whether there are monolingual speakers left or not. I came to know that there are still a couple of them in the south of Tunisia that are just monolingual and do not converse in the colloquial variety of the country as everybody else. But that's still to verify when I go for instance, a traditional field work, because it's very important to record the speaker and for the documentation purposes of the language.
Okay, so just continuing sort of along that one. So, but if they were to take a census of the population, would they say, 100% is Arab, or would they distinguish, like ethnically, like along those lines in a census? So if you're saying it's, at a best guess, maybe it's 1 million or 1%, but if the percentage of the population, like I said, I don't know, let's say it's 25%, then it's a much larger. I shouldn't say it's it's not that I want to make it say it's a small problem to lose the language, but if the percentage of the population was only 2% and only 1% of the population spoke the language, and 50% of the people who are of that population spoke it, right? So it's a different way of looking at it. But if the population was 25% of the whole population, then that 1% is makes it far more urgent, something to look into.
Yes. But like again, we don't know the numbers. We really, specifically for the speakers, this is a very important information that remains lacking. After the revolution, you see them on Facebook. Everybody is trying to perform this identity, perform this language, but that does not reflect exactly whether it is still. Obviously, it is still a linguistic minority, even though culturally and genetically it's not. But again, it remains difficult to tell at this point per to date.
Okay. So now, you've mentioned before because it's not just a singular factor. There's other things, but one of the things you mentioned was Arab conquest. Now I see very, very small amounts of it in South Asia. Urdu-speaking parts of it, especially, but I've also noticed in Afghanistan, like just little things. We used to say Khudafiz for goodbye, but then in the late 80s they said no, Khuda is the Persian word. Use Allah, so a lot of people just started adopting Allahfiz. So they're just changing a little bit of the language. Whereas again here, North Africa, until Arab colonization, you did not have Arab speakers there, really, right? You might have some merchants and stuff, but the population did not speak Arabic. So how much of that is having an effect on a language? Like Arabs coming in, wiping out local culture, local customs, along with the language and everything. And then the distinguishing between Arabs and, North Africans who aren't technically Arabs.
Well, so in the looking back at the history, for instance, the indigenous people of North Africa, it goes without saying, they are the Amazigh or the Amazigh people. They are unknown by Amazigh people, and the first linguistic contact, cultural and linguistic contact, happened with the Phoenicians first, who came from the east. Obviously, they established Carthage. I don't know if you know about Carthage in Tunisia in 1814. BCE and 814 BCE, and that's how the first linguistic contact. How it started with the indigenous people. Amazigh language at the time, or Amazigh language, had different label, which is Libyc as well. That's a different name of the language. But what's interesting about that period, about that phase of history, is there was more of a status of bilingualism that started to happen. So both languages survived together, the Phoenician and the indigenous language, the Amazigh. And then came the Greek, followed by the Romans, and even despite the Romans invasion, or despite the Romans colonization and the destruction of Carthage, etc. I mean, linguistically speaking, there was not such a danger imposed on Amazigh. There was not a risk imposed on Amazigh status. And again, I mean, we can safely talk about a status of bilingualism that was taking place with the Romans. While it's important to mention that during the Roman Empire, I mean, Amazigh people were more known by other names, such as the Maori, and then the Mauritanians, in affiliation to the Mauritanian Empire, which is a Roman Empire, a division of the Roman Empire, but within the territory of North Africa, etc. And then came and that was the 7th century, and the coming of the Muslims, or the Arabs from the peninsula, and that's where the first linguistic clash started to occur, because I mean, the Arabs did not come with Islam only, but forced an assimilation, forced a sort of colonialism of assimilation, if I may say, on the indigenous people, on the Amazigh people. But I mean, with regard to Tunisia, the Muslims or the Arabs just occupied the urban areas, and at the time, I mean, the contact, or the outcome of the linguistic contact, was what linguists, or some linguists, like to call sedentary Arabic, which means Arabic spoken, a form of Arabic that starts to be spoken within the urban areas. That's in the 7th century, and it continued as such within the linguistic change. Obviously, there was cultural and political change imposed on the people. One of the major events, for instance, one of the major incidents, is the killing or the assassination of the leader of the Amazigh tribes, known by the name Dihya, though Arabic or the Arabs like to call her Kahina, which means a witch. I mean, it's basically a negative name attributed to her, while her Amazigh name was basically Tihya. So she was the woman, she was an icon who resisted Islam and resisted the Arabs till her death. I mean, there was some controversy or some legends around how she was killed. Some stories say she poisoned herself and refused to give up to the Arabs, while others say that she was assassinated and her head, I mean, she was beheaded actually, and her head was given a trophy to the Arab Muslim preacher at the time, whose name was Hassan ibn Nu'man. Obviously, there was during that time there was the establishment of Kairouan, the first Islamic city in North Africa, and the city still exists with the same name, Kairouan, in Tunisia, and that was established by Uqba, the companion Uqba ibn Nafi', and who was killed by an Amazigh leader as well, who's a relative of Al-Kahina or Dihya, whose name is Axel or Qusayla.
Can I just stop you for a sec? I mean, like, this is kind of interesting, but I was trying to get at, like, you know, I don't mind the history, but I was trying to get at, like, you know, when they take away cultural practices, like what kind of effect that's going to have on the language. When, you know, it's not just wiping out the language is bad, but it's also wiping out the identity of those people, right? So I was trying to get at that, and like, I mean, like I said, the history and everything is kind of interesting, but if you can maybe just talk about, or what you know about that, like, you know, the effects that that's going to be having on the language and stuff like that.
But so I mean, obviously the Amazigh identity was, I mean, since the coming of the Arab Muslims, started to acquire negative connotations, and as a matter of fact, the term Berber, for instance, which is in the Greek and Roman meaning, means barbar or barbarous, and it was used by the Greek to refer to just foreign or strange people. When it was adopted by the Arabs, it's taken a negative meaning to connote, for instance, meanings of savagery or unrefined people, uncivilized people, etc., in reference to the Amazigh people. And the only way to be civilized and the only way to be refined is to convert to Islam and to Arabize, to become Arabs, I mean, in general. So there was several negative meanings perpetuated against the Amazigh people through the use of Berbers, by referring to them with the term Berber, which actually etymologically doesn't have any negative connotations, but when, like I said, when adopted by Arabs, it acquired negative connotations. And it's with the coming of the preaching of Islam and the perpetuation of the idea that Arabic is the language of paradise, the language of Quran, the only savior of these uncivilized, savage people, the processes of assimilation or colonialism of assimilation, I mean, it took roots, and that's how it started. That's how the identity, followed by, I mean, the language, proceeded towards the status of endangerment all over North Africa, despite, like I said earlier, I mean, the resistance of some varieties in some, the continuous resistance in some regions in North Africa.
Okay, so, like I said, continuing on with this. It's just because it's just a pet peeve of mine, but this constant need, like I said, North Africans are Arabs, and there's a list out. Should we just check where it's from? It's list of Arab countries, not Arab-speaking countries, right? So, and that list includes Somalia, and I'm sorry, but Somalia is not okay. Somalia and Sudan. So here are the Arab countries. Like, some of them, fine. Like Bahrain, sure, that's an Arab country. Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait. And then it's got Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Somalia, Djibouti, Sudan, Palestinian territories, and Western Sahara. Now, I'm sorry, but how is Somalia or Sudan an Arab country?
Well, some people think as long as they are in the Arab League, I mean, contemporaneous, basically, that's it's sufficient to check them as Arabs. But basically, this is, I mean, people do not talk about it openly, but it's really a form of colonialism, and it's really a form of supremacy. And the idea that Arabic language or Arabic identity is a supreme being binded to Quran or to religion is so very much common, except that people are not so very much outspoken about it. Except that people, don't like to involve it in these frameworks of colonialism or supremacy for ideological reasons, basically, and for fear to be, for critics, but like I said, back to the history and by reference to how Arab people perceive, for instance, their Arabness, or perceive their language, perceive their culture. The idea of feeling superior is out there. And I've encountered so many people, like when I argued with them, like you did about some Arabic-speaking countries not being Arabs, and the answer would always, well, as long as they belong to the Arab League, then they are Arabs. As long as the constitution states that they are Arabic nations, when the official language is Arabic, then they are Arabs. And that's basically, is strategy is of erasure. It's a clear strategy of erasure that's people don't like to speak about it. Even Amazigh people, I've encountered Amazigh people who would not think of Arabs or Arabic language as a colonial language and find it too hard to go. It's like for them it's a long stretch to go to that point. And they would say, well, no, colonialism is just between 15th century and the 21st century, or 15th and 19th century. The ages or the years of discovery, etc. But many Amazigh people, for instance, would consider the Ottoman Empire a colonial empire. The French colonialism, obviously a colonial, but the Arab invasions or the Arab Muslim invasions, not a colonial colonial invaders. So there is this you don't understand. It's just and again, I think it's the power of religion, for fear of being dissociated with Islam. Because Arabic, like I said, is so very much binded, so very much immersed in Islam. And actually, it capitalizes basically its power, its position in the world. It capitalizes so much on the fact that it's related to Islam.
Okay, on staying on this for a second, because just very recently, right? So, well, I shouldn't say very, very recently, but the Taliban in Afghanistan, famously they blew up those Buddhas just outside of Kabul. Then, not so long ago, ISIS was doing that in Syria and Palmyra. They blew up all the ruins, and both Al Qaeda and ISIS were going through museums, trashing statues, and then some they were selling to make money. So, that's basically wiping out any kind of culture that's not Muslim, right? Any kind of culture that's not Islamic. Anything that might veer you away from the religion, get rid of it. Same thing like when they got rid of when ISIS went after the Yazidi, they burnt all their temples down. So what kind of things like that, culturally significant, you force them to convert to a religion, so obviously they prayed somewhere else, where temples burned down, art destroyed, were people forbidden from, I know that for a while they stopped the women from putting the tattoos on their eyes, and things like that. Is that what kind of things like that did they do?
Well, with regard to Amazigh people, obviously tattoo is deemed haram. And not only, even to date, you find these women who are beautifully adorned with all these tattoos and features, which carry a lot of cultural values and meanings. But at the same time, they feel so guilty of having those tattoos, and they're like, we don't know how it's going to be punished by God another day. Hopefully they're going to just forgive us, because we know that tattoos is haram. Obviously, that's one of the cultural aspects of Amazigh language that has been attacked or attempted to be wiped off. The names. Amazigh names are not allowed in none of the Arabic-speaking countries in North Africa. People have to be, they're deemed strange, they're deemed inappropriate, and even unlawful. And people have to name their kids Arabic names or Arabic Islamic names. if I may say. Another thing, I mean, obviously the language, because the language, I mean, some of the Islamists in North Africa, they even called the Tamazight language of the pagans. Or the non-believers, and it would be haram to speak that language. I mean, favoring Arabic. I mean, till very recently, members of parliaments in Tunisia and in Algeria, those are very famous members of parliaments who I mean, there was this members of parliament in Algeria who clearly declared that she would kill her daughter if she heard her speak in Tamazight, conversing Tamazight with her friends or peers. And there is this member of parliament in Tunisia who was like, well, Arabic is endangered, is in danger right now, basically modern standard Arabic, and we have to enact a law where everybody should speak the language, even people who were even in social media, and those who do not abide by speaking Arabic should be penalized. We should think about a sort of penalty for people who converse on social media and not using modern standard Arabic. I mean, using even the colloquial Arabic, not even Tamazight, is in his mind should be considered illegal and should be penalized. I mean, using our native languages, which is the colloquials, should be penalized. So things of this sort, I mean, they've been perpetuated across history and policies in North Africa.
Okay, I mean, yeah, like that's okay. You've got that fight. You said, you speak with people there, and they might not see that as colonialism, but here in the West, you get that as well, right? You'll always hear about, European colonialism. But if I try to bring up, discussing Islam or discussing problems, in Saudi Arabia or whatever, you bring up the problems, and they're like, oh no, that's just because of colonialism, that's just because of Western imperialism. And then when you bring up Arab imperialism, they don't want to hear it, they don't even want to see it. It's just like, no, it never happened. I mean, it's the exact same thing, and it's, it's frustrating.
It is frustrating because, I mean, it's a fact. I mean, how would these people explain the erasure of Tamazight language, for instance, if it was not a colonial strategy, if it was not a sort of colonialism? How would they explain people are not allowed to name their kids with the names of their ancestors? Just because they're Amazigh and the names that they're chosen are Tamazight, not Arabs. If that's not a form of colonialism, I mean, it's really frustrating and irritating. I mean, and these people need to check the fact. I mean, I think I don't know. I think not being blinded or are playing deaf on these facts, it's what contributes basically, for instance, to the endangerment of several indigenous cultures, for example, Tamazight, and which contributes to the erasure of these cultures and languages. I mean, from one side you find them so very much humanist and they argue for the rights of everyone, but when you talk about Arab, it's that the Arab colonialism is like a red flag, but it's not. I mean, Arabs themselves talked about Arabic and the Arabs as colonizers. There are plenty of Arab authors and intellects who admitted that it was an invasion. I mean, when you think about the number of slaves the numbers are between 30,000 and 60,000 people who have been enslaved from North Africa and taken to the peninsula basically from the Amazigh tribes. I mean, those are Amazigh men and women who have been enslaved and taken to the peninsula, and because the stories say that because they are fair complexion, like they are white and they have these certain traits that the Arabs liked and etc. But these are facts. I mean, slavery.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but it's just that, right? Like the Arabs came in and took all that, but it's not that only that they agree with it, they glorify it. Like, okay, look at this. This proves the power of Islam. This proves are right. This proves, that, like Islam was magnificent because we conquered all these lands. That was proof of their religion. That was proof of whatever they were doing was the right thing to do, right? It's
exactly. And by the way, they are. I mean, one important thing to mention here is that for instance, with regard to Amazigh people, they're majority Muslims, and they. I mean, even though these facts, even though then, I mean, in my opinion, at least, I mean, the blame Amazigh would put the blame only on the Arabs or the Arabization policies and exclude Islam. When I mean, in reality, I think that Arabs or Arabization couldn't have happened if it was not endorsed by Islam. I mean, even even if it's not for the sake of Islam. I mean, all these nation state leaders and who are deemed to be seculars, for instance, are all these dictators, all right, who endorse the project of nationalism and pan-Arabism, which is naturally secular. I mean, when it comes to Arabic and impose an Arabic, they would bring the Islam element, or they would use Islam as their scapegoats to impose Arabization. And Amazigh, like for instance, many people, I mean, they fell into that, and still they would find it very sensitive to criticize or to link Islam to Arabs. I mean, they would treat these two things, they would put these two things in two different categories. Arabs are not, or Arabization is not necessarily a Muslim project or an Islamization project. It's different. Islam is innocent of whatever the Arabs did to us. And I think, I mean, some of the Amazigh intellects, I mean, they are very few, unfortunately. I mean, nowadays they start to talk about decolonizing the Amazigh mind, because it's very important. And by decolonizing or being involved in the decolonization process, it's very important to understand the nature of Islamicization and Arabization. And it's very important to distinguish between the language, for instance, Arabic, because there are so many Amazigh, they just hate Arabic, which is the language. Arabic has done nothing to them, but never criticize Islam or never blame it on Islam or the project of Islamicization. So unfortunately, it's even, I mean, from these people themselves who have been like victims, real victims of the Islamization of North Africa, for instance, they still want to make a distinction between Islam and Arabic. When, I mean, studies, I mean, there have been so many studies that have been done with regard to this, for instance, question, and also does Arabic language encourage radical Islam? And there is this guy, his name is James Kaufman, who was the director of the of America Mid East Educational and Training Services in Tunisia. He did a study in 1989 and 1990 in two universities in Algeria, the University of Alger and another university of Wahran, and he came out with this conclusion that yes, Arabic language encourages radical Islam. There is a strong bind and link there, and we have to recognize that. But unfortunately, like you said, so many people are frustrated and they get irritated at the mere thinking of this hypothesis, which was a reality, by the way, has been a reality since ever.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I've traveled quite a bit, and I was in Bosnia, and it's the only place I've really ever heard this, but a lot of the Muslims that I'd met there, I was there working with the military, and a lot of the Muslims I'd met there would still go to the mosque, would still pray. I mean, they were very, very secular, laid back. But the only thing they followed was not eating pork. But some did go to the mosque, but they would they would grumble about the fact that they were forced to learn at least to be able to pronounce the words in another language to practice their faith. And they're like, well, why can't I just do it in Bosnian, right? Why do I have to learn Arabic? Why can't, like the religion and the language are so intertwined. I mean, the Quran is only the Quran in Arabic. Any translation is just like a shadow of it, right? You have to speak in Arabic. I mean, I don't see how anyone can differentiate the language from the religion. I mean, the language is tied into the religion.
It is a major symbol. It's so very much tied into Islam. I mean, one time I was in the subway speaking about your experience, and there was this guy who was trying. I mean, he's an African-looking guy, and he was trying so hard to memorize the dua in Arabic. It's like a dua made of 3 or 4, like maybe 2 sentences in a paper, and he was like, he would cover the paper, and then he would try to memorize it in Arabic, and when he'd go back, I know that his native language, I mean, for sure, his native language and his mother tongue is not Arabic, but because he's Muslim, because he looked Muslim with the way he was dressing up. I mean, and I'm like, you don't have to, why are you giving yourself hard time? Just translate it in your language and do the dua in your own language. I mean, God should be able to listen in any other language. Isn't he the omnipotent? Isn't he the one who knows?
Yeah, but that's just it. I mean, but it's, no, but also, okay, I mean, I think this is part of it because, you can talk about the part of the wiping out of the culture, whatever, but people don't know what they're praying to. People don't have an understanding. I mean, 80% of Muslims don't speak Arabic. The stuff they, like the prayers they're doing in the mosques in South Asia or in Malaysia, or whatever, some of these peoples have no clue what they're praying to. Like, calling for the death of apostates, Jews, Christians, and, like homosexuals, whatever. Like, but they have no idea. They're just going along, just going, Ameen, Ameen, Ameen. And it's like,
no understanding of the content. I mean, they have no understanding of their content, of what they're reading, or what. I mean, I was a pretty devoted Muslim, but secular at the same time. I've been always secular, but I loved Islam. It was a passion for me. It was not even a religion. It was like a hobby for me, and I loved it so much growing up. And when I pray, if I'm in a rush or something, I would pray with short surahs, with short chapters. And after I became ex-Muslim, I realized, short chapters, to mention, what I mean is Surah Tabbat Yada, the one about the cousins of Muhammad, Abi Lahab.
Yeah.
And that's, and after I became ex-Muslim, I realized how stupid I was praying with that surah, because that surah is just an insult. Like, it's someone insulting somebody else. When you're in a position of prayer, you have to be in the most peaceful mode ever, like very tolerant and peaceful and open-minded and receptive and positive and and I was like all the time using that surah, and I didn't understand its meaning till I left Islam, till after I left Islam. And I was like, Muslims pray with the surah when this surah is just like an insult, like they're playing with, they're using an insult and a register of insult to pray. And this is so very much like, it's kind of like schizophrenic or something, like you're praying. Pray is supposed to be like for pacific, for to say good words, to say positive words, and when here you're insulting someone, you're insulting the uncle of Muhammad while praying. How would that be a prayer?
Yeah, I know. Like I said, some of this just doesn't make sense. But yeah, I know. Yeah, no.
Speaking about
go ahead.
Speaking about those people who so many people who are so secular and don't know, but they're just so maniac when it comes to Islam. Most of the Arab leaders, the dictators, are secular leaders. The founders of Pan-Arabism, Michel Aflaq, who founded the Ba'ath Party and Pan-Arabism, and was so fanatic about Arabization process, and he called even to eradication of whoever does not identify themselves as Arabs everywhere in the Middle East and North Africa. These people, he was Christian and he was secular, but again, his strong instrument, it's most persuasive instrumental to convince people was religion, was Islam. It's the language of this, it's a sacred religion, it's the language of Quran. So you have to speak it and give up on your own native or mother tongues in favor of Arabic. So it's so very much Arabic and Islam are so very much complementary. They're so strongly complementary to each other.
Okay, the dictator thing and the secular thing. That's okay. I think that's a huge problem because you have now in North Africa, places like Iraq, even with the Shah. Like, I mean, not saying what's going on with the Ayatollahs, and I'm glad people are fighting back against that, but even like with the Shah, you had dictators put in place under the name of secularism. So if you bring up secularism in some of those places now, that word is tainted. That word is, we don't want that because it's associated with having a dictatorship. Like, you can't have enforced secularism.
Well, the secularism is, I think, that's how they've been described, but I think it's been misunderstood. I mean, by secular dictators, I mean, though the literature, that's how they describe them in the literature, secular leaders. I mean, I think they mean that the policies that those leaders, they refer to the type of the policy that those leaders impose it, and in the sense that they forbade people from talking about certain topics, and those are politics and religion. I mean, in these nations, two taboo topics, and in the Arab nations in general, two taboo topics still before the 2011 revolutions were religion and politics. You don't come close to near these two topics, and that's how they describe the leaders. I mean, as secularists, but in practice. Of course they're not. I mean, even maybe they're in their private lives, yes, but when it comes to imposing policies and power, I mean, the religion element was always present in their discourse, always present. Hosni Mubarak, for instance, in 2004, he had a famous speech against one of the Egyptian journalists. His name was Shubashi, a famous journalist who wrote a book. The title of the book, if I remember very well, was Down with Sibawayh. Sibawayh, who was the father of the Arab philology and linguistics and the grammar. Okay, and the title of the book was Down with the Sibawayh, and the main what he was arguing for in the book, I mean, what Shubashi was arguing for in his book, was to stop calling Arabic a native language or mother tongue, because it's not a native language of no one. It is not the mother tongue of no one, scientifically and linguistically speaking. It's just the official language imposed by politics. So there was all this, turmoil that arose against him. Politicians and journalists and intellects and everyone was, how dare you saying that Arabic is not our mother tongue. And he tried his best. He was like, your mother tongue is Egyptian, the colloquial, the one we speak, the one we grew up speaking, the one of which we utter our first words at the stage of babbling. And everybody was like, how dare you? That's a vulgar form of Arabic. How dare? That's a colonizer form. I mean, they would call the colloquial, our mother tongues, colonized forms of Arabic or of languages of colonizers, but the mother tongue is Arabic. And then he was, by the way, he was like. He had to resign. They pushed him to resign his position as a journalist and to shut up for a while, and then come back and say, well, I didn't mean that. I meant like he tried to compromise. But then Hosni Mubarak, who was like was also a secular dictator, for instance, in 2004, he made a speech against this guy, and which he argued, we should protect our Arabic, our language, our mother tongue Arabic language of these kind of guys, bad guys who are trying to corrupt the language of paradise. For in Hosni Mubarak's mind, Arabic is the language of paradise. A secular dictator, for a secular leader, for instance, known for his secularism. So this is a real life example of how secularism is misunderstood in the Arabic speaking world.
Yeah, but that's it's that, like I said, that's why I think it's a huge problem, because it was sold to them these guys were sold to them saying, okay, this is, these are secular dictators. So people think, oh yeah, that's what secularism is going to bring me. I don't want that because they don't know exactly what it is. Okay, but I don't know if you know enough about this or if you could maybe even compare, just because the pan-Arabism compared to what like Hassan al-Banna did with the Muslim Brotherhood and that kind of ideology, because the Muslim Brotherhood was not about Arabs per se, it was pushing Islam, whereas like the pan-Arabism was promoting the identity of being Arabs, and because of the fact that you're Arabs, then you should have an affinity for Islam, whereas the Muslim Brotherhood was just about imposing Islam in power through political means, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, pan-Arabism basically had like it was clear about her foundational tenets, and those are rejection, hostility, annihilation of whoever identified themselves as non-Arab. Exactly the same ideology as Islam. If you're not Muslim, I mean, you're exposing yourself to some sort of penalty, some sort of annihilation. And this is how they were the area where they pan-Arabism and Islamism, I mean, they meet so well and they complement each other so well.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, they're both totalitarian thinkings.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, just to get back on something, because I'm trying to show that, and this is like getting way, way off topic. So right after the shooting in Christchurch, and I've talked about this a couple of times with a couple of different people, and you had all these people. Well, I shouldn't say all these, but there was a lot of people putting out this stupid little pyramid, and on the bottom it was like whiteness, and if you're just ignoring someone's racist comments or whatever, it's just all white people, and then the pyramid leads up to the top and says, that leads up to white supremacy. So all white people are responsible for white supremacy. And if you were trying to tell one of those people, well then, okay, every single Muslim is responsible for every terrorist attack, which is a stupid thing to say, right?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, but it's just as stupid to say all white people are responsible for white supremacy.
And overgeneralization.
Yeah. So like, I mean, like you were talking about with like all what we were just talking about before. I was trying to like get people to see, okay, how Islam, like a pan-Islamization and a pan-Arabization are intertwined. You're putting one aspect over on everyone else. That's the same kind of mentality as a white supremacist, because they want to put white people over on everyone else, right? Not all white people are white supremacists, just like not all Muslims are terrorists. And these things shouldn't have to be said, but all white people, or it's whiteness that led to white supremacy that caused the guy in Christchurch to go shoot up that mosque. It drives me crazy, because then I understand why when I try to criticize specific parts of Islam, that I'm called a racist, because, oh my God, you're attacking all Muslims. It's like, no, because in their mind, it's all.
Yeah, well, they don't make differences, but what the difference between the people and the idea, what we are talking about is when we say pan-Arabism or nationalism or Islamicization or Islamism, these are ideologies. We're talking about ideologies and how they function. We're not how they've been functioning and how they've been affecting the people, but not about, of course, not about the individuals, not about the people. Yeah, so it's totally different, a different discourse. We're just like talking ideologies, talking how these ideologies have been displayed and exercised. I mean, and on the power dynamics and what kind of instruments, what kind of mechanisms that they've been fed on. So, I mean, obviously, Arabic language. I mean, when I speak about Arabic language is just innocent. It's just free of all. I mean, it has nothing to do with all these ideologies that have been like imposed on it. Imposed on the language. Like the language itself, I mean, has nothing to do with colonialism, with endangering, for instance, the other languages or pushing other languages to status of endangerment. I mean, it's totally different. But it is more about what ideologies have been used, or how the ideologies have used the language to feed on, to boost up, for instance. But the languages themselves, I mean, just like the people, I mean, they're not bad. I mean, you cannot even talk about a bad language. I mean, all languages are equal. All languages, I mean, they are just neutral, if I may say. So it's basically our focus, the discussion or the public discourse is that we are raising is on the ideology and how those ideologies have been practices, and the outcome, or maybe the impact of these ideologies. Obviously, Arabization alone was not going to be powerful without Islam, and was not. I mean, I don't think that Arabization alone could have, for instance, hurt Tamazight as much as it's the case nowadays. I think it was intertwined with the other ideologies. It happened to be religious ideologies, and that's Islam. And this is, I mean, something like it's very visible. I mean, we can all see.
All right. So, anyways, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if you have any other last thoughts on the matter, if you want to let people know where they can get a hold of you. If you got anything you're working on that you want to let people know about, go ahead.
Well, okay, I'm continuing on trying to revitalize and document Tamazight language. My dissertation is going to be published hopefully by maybe next year, and people can hold. I mean, I'm always on Facebook. So with the name Soubeika Bahri, my Facebook is public, or on Twitter with Ariha Jasmine. So my social media is so public, and my book, which is, I mean, my dissertation, which I think is a groundbreaking dissertation with regard to the case of Tunisian Tamazight. I mean, like I said, hopefully will be in a book by the mid of next year.
All right.
And yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for listening. And I'll be back.
Thank you for having me, Abhay. Thank you so much.
No problem.